Hi, fellows. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video on Resolution's financial templates. We will cover best practices for using Resolution materials, focusing on the budget template and expense tracker, as well as financial best practices to effectively manage your venture expenses. We will be using a fake venture, Hats for Cats, to help you understand what this could look like in your own work. Our goal for this video is to provide you with the knowledge you need to set yourself up for an easier installment review process. I'm joined by my colleague Jocelyn from the finance team, who is going to start by taking us through the budget template.
Hi everyone. I will be doing an overview of the budget template that you see on your screen now. As Abby mentioned, we're looking at a venture called Hats for Cats. So you'll see that information filled out for this venture here. If you onboarded recently, at the start of your fellowship, you were asked to complete the budget template. While this is a requirement for expense tracking, it is also meant to be a tool to help you plan how you will spend the resolution funds that were awarded to your team. Your venture budget should function as a roadmap and a guide for the plans you and your team has for your venture in a fixed amount of time. So, before filling out this budget tracker, meet with your team to set some goals and start visioning. This means you should plan your activities or programming and set concrete goals for what you want and wish to accomplish. Ask yourself, what can my team accomplish with X amount of funding? For the example venture Hats for Cats, the team is looking to use the grant to initialize production of hats. So you'll see that reflected in the budget and later on in the expense tracker. Next, you should make a broad list of everything you will need in order to accomplish your goals. Work backwards to research and gather data, meet with vendors, go window shopping to get estimates for items in your budget. Now, we'll review the budget template with what information you'll need to fill this out. Start with the currency exchange rate. If your budget is not in US dollars or your ventures is not operating in US dollars, please include the currency exchange rate used at the time of completion. This will help you track currency fluctuations over time. So, starting from the time when you're planning to when you actually are spending and making expenses, and this will help you account for any variations in your budget. In this video's descriptions, we've also included a link to a currency exchange rate calculator that we recommend. On the top right, you'll see the exchange rate box. So the example venture Hats for Cats is based in Canada and operates in Canadian dollars, which they have reflected here. So you'll see the 1.41 Canadian dollars to one US dollar exchange rate. We know and understand that currency exchange rates fluctuate, and this may change between your submissions. So, from when you fill out this budget to when we review your expense tracker, and that's okay. And if your country's currency undergoes significant fluctuations, please make a note of this. So, we'll move down to where you'll note the majority of your expenses. Here, you will list the expenses you plan to spend your grant on. This list can change based on many factors, and that's okay. On this full budget tab, this can be more general categories such as office supplies or raw materials. But please note that when it's time to complete your expense tracker, you will need to list the specific items at the time of purchase. So for every expense, you will also need to list the quantity and the total cost. You should start by filling in whatever currency you will pay in and use the exchange rate at the top of the document to calculate the conversion rate into US dollars, which is where you'll get the total cost in US dollars. Next, your quantity should reflect how often you will need to make these purchases. So that's in column D on this tracker, quantity. So are they one-off purchases? Are they recurring? How many of each will you need? For recurring costs, tracking quantity will help you understand how much it will cost to continue operating at this level and help you plan for when you will need to expand. Keeping note of the units will also be helpful. So in this tracker, you'll see units like yards, spools, hours for labor, month for electricity bills. And this is all information that is going to be helpful later on when you're making more plans and using your expense tracker. In the last column, G, the categories field will help you categorize expenses into groups. So you'll see some examples of categories here: equipment and supplies, labor and worker cost, outreach. These categories will help you paint a bigger picture of your budget rather than looking at a lot of individual items listed. And this is a customizable field. So when you click into those categories, you'll see an option to go in and edit that pencil button, and you can create categories of your own. however many you need, or maybe you need fewer. Perfect. So once you've filled out the budget for both of your installments, you should go down to get the totals. After putting together your budget, make sure that the total for both the local currency, so that's column E, and the USD column, column F, add up to your total grant amount. The totals for the expenses tagged to each installment should also add up to the amount you will receive in each disbursement. So you'll see here, Hats for Cats was awarded a total of 1,000 US dollars, with that split into two installments, and you'll see that added up to what is going to be awarded to the team during the first installment and during the second installment. So that's an overview of the budget template and what you will need. And once you've completed your budget and it is approved, your budget is good to go for onboarding purposes. But this shouldn't be the only time you review this. You should always come back to your budget. It should be a reference for you and your team. Your budget can change too, and that's okay. The general guideline is that any changes less than 10% of your total grant amount can be approved by your resolution guides. Any changes greater than 10% or the addition or elimination of a significant line item must be reviewed and approved by resolution staff. So we'll move into some examples to help you understand where and who you will want to talk to when you have changes in your budget. So let's say your team budgeted $100 for raw materials, but due to inflation, you now expect to spend $175 on raw materials. That's an increase of 75 on this item, but less than a 10% change in terms of the total grant installment. You can talk to your guides and review the budget to make any changes. So since you're spending more for raw materials, you might need to move other expenses around to compensate. In another example, let's say your original budget did not include a piece of equipment that you now realize is necessary. That piece of equipment costs $500 and your total grant amount was $5,000. This addition of a line item reaches that 10% threshold, so you will need to talk to resolution staff to get this approved. Ultimately, it matters that you are keeping track of your budget and using it to make informed decisions for the venture's next steps. So always come back and refer to this, see and understand what your plans were, and though that may change, just make sure you using it as a reference point in conversation. And that's a brief overview of the budget template, and I will pass it along to Abby, who will go into depth on the expense tracker.
Thanks, Jocelyn. So you will notice that the expense tracker looks remarkably similar to the full budget tab. However, there are going to be some key differences. Like Jocelyn said, the full budget is a map for the larger categories of your venture, expenses, and goal. The expense tracker zooms in further. It'll include greater detail and should only include expenses actually incurred to date. Any anticipated spending should still be on your full budget, so it doesn't need to be here quite yet. Starting at the top of the expense tracker, please note the time frame that you are working in. This is just good financial practice, so that you can keep organized and understand what you're looking at when you come back to this expense tracker and the time frame you're working with. Moving to the leftmost column, you will see that we ask you to note which installment you are working with so that we can track what is tagged to installment 1 and what is tagged to installment 2. It might be obvious to you, but it wouldn't necessarily be obvious to the staff member reviewing it. So please just fill out 1, 2, or 3 to let us know which installment we're looking at. Moving into the receipt column here in column C, this is where you should link your receipts for any expenses. We put this as the leftmost column really intentionally because you should be starting with the receipt. When staff review your documents, we're checking to make sure that the expense tracker matches the receipts provided. Therefore, if you work from the receipts, you're not only ensuring you're keeping accurate accounts of your spending, but also makes the process a bit smoother. Each expense should have something in its receipt column. You can do this as shown here by either linking it, or if you're uploading your documents in a PDF packet, you can also note which receipt in the packet each expense corresponds to. If you choose this option, please be as detailed as possible. For example, note page 1, left-hand receipt, line 3. In column D, you should note the date on the receipt. If the date on the receipt does not correspond to the date that it was actually paid, please just make a note of this. We are looking to see that the date matches whatever is on the receipt. This is a slight distinction between cash-based accounting versus accrual-based accounting. If you want to learn a bit more about the distinction between those two, check out the finance glossary but generally match what's on the receipt. In column E, you should list the individual expenses for your venture. So, for example, we bought the felt buttons and thread on the same day from the same vendor, but we want to list them out separately. We wouldn't want to just put raw materials in this category or crafting supplies. We would want to know the individual expenses that we're buying. Like Jocelyn said, this is really to help you understand how price might fluctuate and what it would cost to scale up your venture at a given level. For this reason, you should also note in columns F and G the quantity and the cost per item. Please make sure you are including units in your quantity, and if the cost per item isn't listed out on your receipt, you might need to calculate this yourself. And a good way to check your work is to make sure that whatever is in column F multiplied by column G is going to equal column H, which is going to be your total cost in the local currency. We do not need conversions for US dollars on your expense tracker. We do need it on your budget tab, but whatever your receipt is in should be whatever your expense tracker lists. In column I, you should note the category that each expense corresponds to. When staff are reviewing your documents, one of the things that we're looking for is that the categories tagged to each expense on your expense tracker match your full budget tab. So always a good practice to double check your work. The sum if function is really handy for this, for checking. So please just make sure that things match across spreadsheets. Now let's talk about different types of purchases. We've included a few here as examples. Starting with our sewing machine. We paid for our sewing machine in 2 installments. So we included both receipts to show that we have made both of these purchases. If you are like us and you didn't get a receipt for proof of registration because the vendor just wouldn't give one to you, you can follow what we did here. We included our proof of registration document and a handwritten receipt. If you're ever reimbursing someone, you should have a handwritten receipt and some other form of corroborating documentation. For us, we submitted this handwritten receipt and took a screenshot of the money leaving our bank account as additional proof. When it comes to reimbursing folks, we encourage you to get them to sign this document, especially so. So this is not only good for the installment release process as additional documentation, but also ensures that you have a record that you paid them in case they try to dispute it. If you are employing any employees, casual workers, or are generally paying anyone for their labor, you can track it here on this worker cost tracker. Just be sure that what you put on the worker cost tracker matches what you put on the expense tracker and matches what is then on the budget as well. We encourage you to think creatively about what can serve as proof of purchase. The standard is that every purchase has a vendor issued receipt. Where that isn't possible, you'll need to create a handwritten receipt all the time with the vendor or individual name, address, and contact information, the date of the purchase, the item or items purchased, quantity, amount, payment method, did you pay in cash, card, mobile transfer, and then you should sign it, put the date, and keep it. In addition to this handwritten receipt, which should be standard for anything that doesn't have a vendor to issue a receipt, you will need another form of corroborating documentation. If you ever have questions about your situation or what documents would be acceptable, please do not hesitate to reach out. We know that this varies widely by country and culture, so please let us know what is or isn't appropriate. Finally, before we wrap up, we do want to share some financial best practices when it comes to tracking your expenses. When tagging and filing receipts, you should be able to locate receipts or documentation for an expense easily. We recommend a digital folder of receipts with a naming convention that makes it easily searchable. We also want you to over-document. Take photos of materials when they're delivered, screenshot the mobile money record, ask for a signature. It is far easier to get documentation at time of purchase than to have to backtrack it. You should also record your expenses as you make a transaction. Your budget and expense trackers are living documents. Don't put them in a folder and forget about them until you're ready to request your installment. Go over them with your guides regularly and make adjustments as necessary. Finally, ask for help. The resolution staff team and your guides are here to support you, but we can't help if we don't know that there's a problem, so please let us know how we can best support you. Thank you so much for watching this training, and please reach out to fellow support at resolutionproject.org with any questions or any way we can support you. Thank you. Bye.